And of course, when it was closed, what do we do with it? Horrifically, it was thought perhaps we demolish it and put a roundabout in its place to ease traffic congestion in Yarmouth.
I have a friend who is an electrician but also a keen mountaineer. So he set himself up as if he was climbing a mountain with all his harnesses and things. But because he was an electrician, he mended all the lights for us.
A vicar came here and was offered the post. And when he got home, he wrote a letter. He said, when I found out what the salary was, I decided that God wasn't calling me to Yarmouth after all.
Hey guys, I've got a quick request. Could you subscribe, like, and comment if you like the content we're making? It's really important to support the channel and carry on having great guests like we've had. So subscribe, like, comment. Very important. Thank you. I have to say, you have your head very, very screwed on, and I've noticed that a few times. And I'm absolutely amazed about what you've done with St George's and what you're doing at the moment. Let's start. What's your role exactly? What are your responsibilities?
Yeah, so I'm the theatre director here. Now, unfortunately, I'm only part-time because I also work in another theatre as well. So my job is to do the programming, to make sure that we have a big variety of things going on for people to come and see. But also a big part of my job, especially here, is looking at funding applications and trying to get as much money as I can for St George's Theatre. Because it's a Grade 1 listed building, it's very expensive to run, and we are lucky in that we get funding from the Borough Council, and also the County Council gives us funding, but unfortunately it only really covers our electricity bill. It doesn't really pay for everything else, so it's up to me to try and get the rest of that money in to balance the books, and unfortunately when I came into post we had quite a lot of debts as well, mostly utility bills, like the water bill was something like £40,000, and there was outstanding electricity bills of £20,000, so I sort of walked into a difficult situation because there were those big debts. So we've worked very hard over the last 7 years, really, to get us back on our feet and to get all the debts paid off. So we're now in a much stronger position. But of course, we always need funding because it costs so much to run.
So, yeah, when did you start? With St George.
I started in 2016, and actually originally I was a consultant because I'd been running Sheringham Little Theatre for it's 22 years now, and that has become a very successful community theatre. They were very lost as to what St George's was going to be, so it was suggested by the Arts Council that I came in and did a consultation, and straight away I was blown away by the building because it is just amazing, but also the community of Great Yarmouth is very special. It's very different from North Norfolk, from Sheringham, and it's got lots of minority communities living here and lots of young families, and it's just a very vibrant town, but has challenges and it has its own issues in Great Yarmouth. So I found it really challenging but also exciting and very, very rewarding to come and work here. So originally I was doing a consultation on how they could make it into a community theatre. So I was commissioned to do an audience development plan, which I did, and I really enjoyed writing it because there's so many opportunities here. But then once I wrote it, they said, right, can you deliver it now? So I had to put my money where my mouth was, really. And by that time, I'd been here about 6 months, and I was already, very fond of St George's. So I thought, actually, it would be really exciting to make this work. So I spoke to Sheringham, and they very kindly said I could do 2 days a week at St George's and keep my role at Sheringham. And actually, those two theatres really complement each other. And it's been very good for me personally in my development to work at St George's, but also it's helped Sheringham. And I'm hoping that Sheringham has helped St George's as well. So we do a lot of joint programming, well, obviously because it's me, but that means that financially we can save money by having a theatre company come and visit 2 theatres in one go. It's, we share the costs and our pantomimes and things. So there's a lot of synergy and some things that make a lot of sense to work together. So I started trying to deliver the audience development programme, and we're doing very well. And then COVID hit, and suddenly it all stopped. I'd managed to get an Arts Council grant for 3 years, and in our second year, COVID hit. And unfortunately, everything just ground to a halt. So we had to wait really until COVID had passed and then pick up the audience development again, which was hard because people had got out of the habit by then of going to the theatre. So I think probably about now, where we are in 2024, we're just beginning to really get back on our feet and get back on track with the audience development.
What are the strengths and the issues in Great Yarmouth?
Okay, so the main issue in Great Yarmouth is lack of money. There is a very deprived area financially for families. There's lots of struggles going on with poverty, and I see it very much in our youth work that we do. So often the young people might come to us and they might not have had tea that day. They might not have had a good night's sleep because they might not have a bed to sleep in. And they might not have the right clothes to wear for a drama session. So these young people need a lot more support. And it actually makes it really endearing because they really find a sense of family within the drama groups that we do. And when we have parties in between shows, they will all play party games together. And they all say to me, "This is my new family," and it's lovely that they have that. And also at Sheringham, the young people are very ambitious and they like to work particularly in their age groups, whereas at Great Yarmouth they're very happy to all work together, all the ages. So often the 8-year-olds will be working with the 16-year-olds, and it's rather lovely because you get that lovely mentor situation where older people are helping the younger people, and that's a real bonus of St George's, I think, and I think everyone benefits from it. So yes, I think the main issue is lack of money, I think.
So I stayed overnight, and I'm going to stay tonight as well. And I'm staying in an Airbnb just outside of Great Yarmouth.
Oh, right.
But the houses are really expensive around there. There seems to be a lot of people, so maybe people commute to Norwich?
Yes,
is that right?
Absolutely. It's very deceptive. So where St George's is based is NR30, and it's one of the most deprived wards of the country and the whole country. Whereas actually just outside Great Yarmouth, and when you're looking at some of the surrounding villages, they're absolutely beautiful and very affluent. So it really is quite a very localised issue that we have to try and work with and support. But it's very hard, unfortunately, to get those people that have got the money from those villages to come into Great Yarmouth. They will tend to head towards Norwich. So that's my job, to make sure that I'm putting things on that they will come to Great Yarmouth to see. So it's getting the right variety of shows and making sure that they have a good experience when they come here. That often people will say to me, "Oh, I'm frightened of parking in the car park, and I'm worried about walking down to the theatre." And I think, no, I've never had any issues. Because they're worried that because they think that it might be aggressive out in the street. It might be, there might be violence in Great Yarmouth due to lack of money, but it's really not like that. It's more a sense of depression, which is something that we need to, is rather than aggression. And therefore I feel it's my job as well to bring that lighter side and for people to have enjoyment and fun and entertainment. Because, when you haven't got much money, it's very hard to keep a cheerful face on. So we do a lot of things, again, revolving around money, me getting funding, so that we can do shows which can be free for families, and we do pay what you can. So they just pay whatever they can afford. I don't want money to be a barrier to stop them being able to engage with us.
And I did notice it when I arrived I've never been in Great Yarmouth. And I noticed, as you say, a bit of a depression.
Yes,
in a way.
Absolutely. Just not a sense of pride in their town, which is a shame because it's a beautiful town. It's got tons going for it, and often people don't realise, the people that live here don't see it.
I've had in other episodes, obviously Theatres Trust and Stratford Public Hall, and some of the topics were about renovating a cultural space to bring people in.
Absolutely.
In the city. Do you think it's the renovation of St George's Theatre has improved this, has brought more people in, is allowing more inclusivity, like a community space for people to gather? if it doesn't, if you don't think it does to what you would like, just obviously feel free to say it. But.
Well, it's sort of double-edged, Mark, to be honest, because it is a beautiful building, and therefore people, when we do open heritage days and things, we do get people that enjoy culture and want to come and see things, discovering the building. And once they've discovered it, then they definitely want to come and see things here. And we've been very lucky, for example, the BBC Concert Orchestra have been using the venue. And they will sell out, and it will be people that will say to me, oh, we live in the villages, but we normally go to Norwich. It's amazing that St George's is here and everything. So that is fantastic, and we can build on that, definitely. But as far as the community are concerned, then it's absolutely vital to me that they engage. And to be honest, I don't need a posh venue for them. We could just we'd enjoy it just as much if it was a village hall. And sometimes I wish it was, because it's so expensive to run this building. And actually what was important for the community is to be able to open the door and say, come in, you're welcome. It's encouraging them into the building. And unfortunately, because it's grade 1, it's really hard to get signage on the building. So often people go past it and they don't realise what it is. And it can be quite daunting. And a lot of people think it is a church. And of course, we know that it's an amazing venue, but just walking past it doesn't really sing out at you that it is that. So my job has been very much a case of going out to the communities and doing workshops and outreach work, and then inviting them into the theatre so that they discover it, having known the work that we already do. And 7 years on, I'm very pleased to say that we have a thriving community theatre, and we have really good youth theatre, but also we have adult drama as well, and they put on their own productions. So I think it's fair to say that definitely we are a community theatre, but we're a very posh one.
Yeah, I did. I attended yesterday one of those rehearsals.
Oh, did you? For Christmas Carol? Was it yesterday?
No, it was like it was a play.
Oh, right, okay.
I didn't listen to it in detail because I was focused on setting up my equipment. But they were adults and teenagers as well.
Yeah, it's really good. And the other thing that's happened a lot with the venue as well, I'm sure later on we'll have a look at the pavilion. That is being used by the community as well. So we have about 8 community groups who hire the space, and they're there every week for their sessions. So again, that helps build up that community venue, because I can then go and have access to those groups and say to them, the pantomime starts next week. Would you like some tickets? Come as a group. And so that really does help bring other community groups into the venue. So we're very lucky to have that extra space as well.
I was surprised it wasn't open any time. I was.
It's disappointing.
Here,
I know. So
I
do
thought,
I know.
Great! I'm going to have a lunch there. I know. Debbie told me there's a cafe.
I know.
So I don't need to stop anywhere else.
I know.
I'll just go straight to the cafe.
And
it wasn't open.
And
I thought this morning, I'm going to have coffee for breakfast. Oh no, it's not open.
No, I know.
Can you explain why it's not open?
I know, and I'm so sorry. You've had to have a horrible instant coffee that I made you, Mark. And I'm so sorry. No, the situation is. Use Sheringham as an example. We have a cafe there that's right in the middle of the town, and through that cafe we take over £200,000 a year, and that fully supports the theatre and all the activity we do. It's run by volunteers, but lovely fresh cakes, fresh scones, beautiful, open all day, really successful. We tried to replicate that here, but unfortunately we're just in the wrong place, and there is very little footfall coming past the cafe. So we would have to have a really exciting offer on to be able to encourage people to come here. We're also in the heart of King Street, which is an incredible community around King Street, and some fantastic coffee bars and lovely fresh pastries and things. The Portuguese have got some amazing natters that everyone wants to eat. So therefore, we've got a lot of competition on our doorstep. So it's coupled with the fact that people don't come and find us here. So the locals will know where to go to get their Portuguese coffee, and we haven't got anything special to offer. So we have started to use it as a space for groups rather than a cafe. And we will open it before a show so that people can have a drink before a show. But it's a great misuse of the asset, and I would love to get involved with a partnership or somebody who wanted to come and take over that cafe and run it as a going concern, because it's beautiful. We've got the plaza space as well, which is great when you put tables and chairs out there. In the summer, it's beautiful and it's completely wasted. So we are genuinely trying to think what we could do with it, how we could make it successful as a cafe.
Yeah, it's I agree. It's amazing. There's the same finishes as well as
it's very posh. It's beautiful.
Theatre. Yeah, so it's quite a shame. Can you use it for weddings, or is the kitchen too small for it?
For weddings, no. We have done that before. So we have a wedding license, and we have had weddings here. And then they've had their reception in the pavilion, and sometimes going on to the plaza if the weather's nice as well. So it can be really beautiful as a wedding venue, and we can set up a temporary sort of marquee that covers from the theatre door over to the cafe. So if it should rain, at least you're not going to get your clothes spoiled going from the reception to the service. So no, we can use it like that.
You're a very good salesperson as well. And do you get access to the car park, which is
yes, absolutely, yes. Now that was a big issue, and it broke my heart. We had to spend nearly £40,000 on bollards around the building to stop the illegal parking. And the reason that we had to do that is because people were just dumping cars here, and
really?
It was yes, absolutely, or just parking for free, and it was creating big access problems. So we have a group on a Thursday with adults with physical disabilities and learning disabilities, and they couldn't get to the venue because there were so many cars around. We couldn't get the wheelchairs in through the door. Plus, when we were doing pantomime, had there been a fire, we would have really struggled to evacuate the building because there were cars everywhere, really illegally parked, basically. So we had to take quite drastic action. But it does mean that we can use it for space for ourselves. So again, that helps with access. If people are struggling, then they know that they can park right outside the door and their car will be safe.
Let's get into finances now. Can you give us some numbers and what you need to cover?
Yes, absolutely.
To run the place?
Yeah. Absolutely. So the running costs of the theatre are about around 225,000, something like that. So what's that? $250,000 to run it, and we take on average about 100,000. So I'm normally about 125,000 short. So that's my shortfall to get the funding. We're very lucky that the Borough Council will give us that 25. So often my target is 100,000 in order to make things work. And that's kind of where we are now. When I first started here, I had all those bills to pay as well. So it was my funding target was like 200,000 to get rid of some of the backlog. But we have now achieved that. And what is happening now is since COVID, we have been doing a lot of tribute bands, which have been very successful. And so we're making money through that. And also we take a lot on the bar when we have a tribute band. So actually slowly my funding target is slightly reducing. So I'm probably down to about 90,000 now, but it's still a meaty target to get every year. And especially when you can't repeat fund, you have to come up. And often funding is about projects. So you might get a big fund, say 50,000 in for a project, but actually that money will go on the project. So there's very little that actually comes into the bottom line to support the theatre. So it keeps me awake at night sometimes, filling that gap. But touch wood, we've always managed to, and it's my job to make sure we do, really.
Yeah, you don't realise how much places like they cost until you get into the nitty-gritty.
Absolutely. And a lot of it are just the utilities. You can imagine, even with the brilliant refurbishment, how much, this building costs to heat. And I've been here when we haven't had any heat, and it's horrendous. It really is freezing in the winter. So it's absolutely vital that we keep it heated. And it's very expensive with all the energy costs going up. So, and because it's Grade 1 listed, it's really hard to adapt it. So at Sheringham, we've been able to really sort of make it very environmentally friendly and become really energy tight. But here it's a much bigger problem. But that again is something I'm working on at the moment. I'm looking at what funding is available and what we can do to actually increase our or improve our energy usage.
So can you detail more? Can you give us more?
I haven't really got that far yet. So like at Sheringham, it was very easy because straight away we did things with the windows, we replaced the doors, we made sure that there were no drafts and it was really tight space. And because we did that, we were able to put in an air source heat pump, I was able to get funding for that, and it's very efficient. Here would be a big problem to do that, to fill in all the drafts, because obviously we're not allowed to really damage any of the fabric of the building. So I need some expert advice, and what I'll be doing is I'm working with Darren Barker, who we'll meet later, and the Preservation Trust, but also English Heritage, to talk to them about what we can do to save energy with an old building like this.
Are you talking to the Theatres Trust as well?
Yes. Now,
because they've got the Theatre's Green Book.
They have, and we do try and abide by the Green Book as much as possible. I also produce the productions here. So when we're putting a production on, I make sure that we're as energy efficient as we can. We recycle sets and costumes and props, and that's quite easy for me to manage. But when it comes to the building, definitely, Theatres Trust are amazing, and they've already given St George's a lot of money. They helped us a lot trying to get signage, particularly on the pavilion. I will definitely be knocking on their door.
They've made a big announcement on the release of that Theatre's Green Book. One small question: can you tell me what's the difference between a Grade 1 listed and Grade 2? And what can you do? What can't you do?
Darren will be able to tell you a lot more than that. I'm not an expert on that. My feeling is with a Grade 1, you're very restricted. You can't do anything that affects the fabric of the building. So we couldn't put a sign outside on the building. We couldn't attach anything to the building.
We still have done it. Sorry.
No.
Okay. So,
no. On the front, will Theatre Trust help us with that? And and English Heritage helped us as well. So yes, we have. They've been very specially put on these. But they're very small, very discreet signs. Yeah. What I want is a great big banner saying St George's Theatre.
Okay, my bad.
No. But they're very tasteful and they're lovely. But you don't see them. Have, which is good. You're a good example. You have it. But you will notice I've got a banner for our pantomime Snow White out the other side. But that is fixed to some scaffold. That we've got, so that it's not touching the building. So my feeling is, and inside as well, we had a theatre company who were determined that they were going to put nails in the wall to hang some lights. And I'm like, no, you can't do anything like that. So I think we're very restricted. I think Grade 2 is slightly less, but I think it's still fairly restricted. So I think any grade listed building is hard to manipulate. Beautiful, and we don't want to spoil it, but yes, you're very restricted.
And is there anything else you'd like to do to improve the theatre? Obviously, you'd like to make it more energy efficient.
Yes, definitely more energy efficient. I would love to get these balconies back in use if we could. At the moment, very sadly, they've become a bit of a dumping ground because obviously storage is a big issue. I was saying to you that these are cupboards along the side, but they're already completely full with everything that we need. So storage is an issue, and therefore the balconies become that storage. Whereas actually, I think it'd be lovely that we could perhaps have art exhibitions upstairs. Would be lovely on top of the balconies, or it could be a reception area and we could do special receptions and things. So I think we're not utilising the space at the best as we could. So my long-term aim would be to get those functioning balconies if we could.
Mark, earlier, one of the volunteers, was saying he can only put 4 people?
Yes, absolutely. We have to be careful because of fire restrictions, plus the staircase, which is beautiful, is original, and we have to be careful. So the idea is no one under the age of 12 is allowed up there because of the restrictions and the fear of falling from the balcony. So at the moment we're allowed, I think it's 20 either side and 40 in the middle. But that makes a big difference, actually. When we're looking at things that sell out like the tribute bands, being able to put people up upstairs really does help us, because by the time you get to that kind of figure, then it's profit coming in, which makes a change. So that's really good. But no, so it needs a big project to make it happen, because we'd have to look at fire regulations and also the stairs and everything. So yes, it's a work in progress, definitely.
On this, have you got any, I presume you've got insurance, obviously. Do you have any unusual high cost for insurance? And so I'll give an example. Morecambe Winter Gardens that I had, I can't remember the name of the episodes, but they spend every year an absolute fortune to check and to insure their ceiling. So I think it's 6 or 7 grand.
Oh wow!
No, I can't remember.
But I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
A lot of money. Do you have something similar?
No, I'm pleased to say. I only know that because I do the insurance for Sheringham and for St George's, and they're quite similar. Okay. So no, there is no special anything that was specially insured.
Are you able to
You're making me
share?
think perhaps I should be now. Perhaps I should be sharing something or insuring something. I'm just looking at these wonderful pillars, which are amazing. And I often wonder there's a crack in one of them. And it keeps getting bigger. And we do keep having specialists look at it and say, it's just cosmetic, don't worry. But it would be awful if anything happened to the pillars. So the insurance isn't that bad. It's something around the lines of, I think it's about $4,000 a year. So, it's still a lot, don't get me wrong. I'd rather be spending that on a community project. But it's important, But it's not, it's not in the region where it's really scary.
And what's the maximum capacity you can have? Because you spoke about fire regulations. And obviously, maybe you can explain it better than me. But,
no, definitely. So when it's seated like we are now, we're actually, and this is really, we're hampered by how many of these seats we've got, and these are dreadful. I'd love it sometime to replace these seats, but we only have 220 seats. So sitting like this now, I would say 220 is full capacity. But we do have the balcony, which has seats up there. So if we look at another 80 up there, so we just take it up to the 300. And 300 in terms of theatre is quite a magic number, because once you get Sheringham, I've only got 160 seats. So once you get to 300, you do start to make some profit. So it's a magic number. So if ever we can fill the house, it's really good. But what we can do is, if we use the space in a different way for a gig that's not having seats, then actually we're allowed to have 300 people down here. So again, that 300 is a good thing. If we're not selling very well, and it looks like we've only sold 60 seats and the show's going to be embarrassing because there'll be tons of empty seats, what we do is we've got these big cabaret tables. So we put them out, and with the cabaret tables, we can only seat 150. But actually 60 people in that setting looks quite busy. Yes. So we will adapt.
That's clever.
We'll adapt the seating depending on what audience is coming in and how it works. And I love that flexibility of it. So for the pantomime, when the schools come, sometimes the schools will bring 250 children, so we can seat 220, but we can then put 30 along the front where they sit on the floor. So it is a very flexible space, and I love it for that.
Is there anything else you'd think would be necessary for the theatre to add more revenue? So I'm thinking maybe you're missing some small rooms so that you could rent them out to groups.
Absolutely.
And then, again, I give an example of Stratford Public Hall. They've got loads of different rooms that they can rent out. So like a co-working space, they rent out, and that's how they generate revenues. Have you got any plans or thoughts?
Well, the thing that's happening at the moment, and again, that's my next thing that I'm looking for funding for, is to actually increase our bar. Because the tribute nights are being so successful, the bar is very limited. We can only fit 2 people behind it, and people have to queue for ages to get served. So we have done some drawings of how to increase that bar, make it much bigger, and be able to have 2 tills and 3 people behind there. And that will probably double our intake in the intervals, which would be incredible. So that's something we're working on. I would like to see the theatre used by groups during the day as well. So we talked about about the cafe and how they hire it. It would be lovely to have. We have one regular group on a Thursday called Faber, who are amazing. But it would be lovely to have other groups using the theatre during the day. We have talked about sectioning areas off so we could create different working spaces within this big space. But again, that would take, we'd have to be careful because we wouldn't be able to, it would have to be flexible changes that we could put up and put down, sort of pop-up changes, nothing that affects the building.
And have you got any restrictions on the use of the space in terms of noise? So can you have nights?
Yes,
events?
We do, because we're in a residential area. So really, come midnight, we need to stop making any noise. And actually, that's fine for bands and everything else. It's not so good if you want to hire it out for a party and they want to go until 2 a.m. or so. We'd have to get a special license for that. So really, we do the parties that we have, and people do hire it for parties, tend to be older people who are quite happy to go home at midnight. So they're not up for 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's a restriction that we have. And we have to be mindful of our residents, especially with the plaza, because we do have music on the plaza during the summer. And, that can be quite disturbing if you live opposite and you don't want to hear loud music. So again, we're very mindful of that. And we work hand in hand with the residents because they are our local audience. So we don't want to upset them. We want them to feel this is their space and that they have a say in it as well.
Before we carry on, we completely forgot about mentioning Paul, about the history of the theatre.
Absolutely. So, he's been incredible. He is. So Paul Davies is a local historian and he sits on the Preservation Society, and he wrote a fantastic book which really captured the whole of the history of St George's right back to medieval times and right up through the refurbishment. So he's documented the whole history, including the stages of the refurbishment. It's an amazing book. If anyone would like to buy it, it's only £10.
But they have to come to
yes,
the theatre.
Do come to the theatre. We'll sell you a book because Paul's not getting them reprinted, unfortunately. So you need to come to the theatre and see it. But no, it's really, really useful. A great record of the history. And we did, for Open Heritage Day, we made some little films, short films. We work a lot with Time and Tide Museum, who are our neighbours. And some of the living history actors came and reenacted in the book. You'll see there's a story of 2 vicars that fall out. They're very competitive. So we had 2 actors dressed up as vicars having the argument that they might have had in St George's. So it's very, we made some really fun sketches to make it more accessible for young people to just enjoy the history of the theatre. So I need to hunt those out as well because they're somewhere on a file.
Again, it's very, very well put. So very, very, very good sales pitch for Paul. But yeah, let's put it just now.
Absolutely, and you'll enjoy listening to him on the podcast. He's very interesting. What he had to say was great.
So about the cafe, I can't remember. I think you mentioned it. When did it get built? Yes. No, obviously not straight. Not with the renovation of the theatre.
No, it was. Now, Darren will be able to tell you there's a bit of gossip about this, Mark, and Darren will be able to fill you in on the gossip. Definite gossip, because, and I only know from hearsay, but Darren knows the actual facts of it. But basically, they were built, or the refurbishment and the pavilion all happened at the same time. But unfortunately, I think it was 2 different architects and they fell out. So a bit like the history of St George's with those vicars falling out. There must be something about it. Let's not fall out, Mark. There must be something about the building. And so, unfortunately, when the refurbishment happened and we did a big launch, I mean, it was before my time, but a big launch for St George's, they couldn't open the cafe at the same time, which was a real shame because that might have really helped with the launching of the cafe and it might have helped it have a stronger chance of survival. But unfortunately, it was closed, and I don't think it opened for another year at least while they sorted out their argument.
What was the argument about?
Darren will know all the details. It was I think it might
I'm
have
curious
been.
Now. I want to know about
ask him. I think it was something to do with the roof or something. Anyway, nobody would take responsibility. There was a mistake had been made somewhere around the roof, and nobody would take responsibility for it. I think the architects blamed the builders, and the builders blamed the architect, and so it just ended up sitting with nothing happening. Somehow it was resolved in the end. Hopefully Darren was probably part of that and helped it be resolved. So they did open it about a year later, but it had missed the momentum of the big opening, which was a shame, I think.
One thing I've noticed, so I also did some acoustic measurements yesterday, and there's not that much, or unless it's really hidden or it performs really well and a very critical places, but there's not that much sound absorption, acoustic treatment around the theatre. There's no big surface in the ceiling, but the reverberation time, which it's not too echoey, basically.
No.
The reverberation time is very low. Well,
right.
For what I can see. It's pretty good, but do you have any limitations on the type of event? Because obviously if you have acoustic music, you need a more reverberant space, and if you have more amplified music, you need a deader space. What are your restrictions?
So could that be why the tribute bands do so well? Because it is such amplification, it is such a big sound. But definitely for me, providing youth theatre, for our young people, it's a real shame because they really struggle. We teach them projection and how to throw their voices, but actually they really struggle in St George's to be heard. When they're on the stage, it's very hard when you get to about the third row to hear young voices, small voices. So we do have to use a lot of microphones, and that's not easy with young people, and it does really limit us. It limits what we can do here in terms of drama. So we do a lot of musical theatre, but it also limits us in terms of how many microphones we have, because unfortunately we only have 8 head mics. So it's difficult when you've got a group of 20 young people. You want them all to have microphones. So it is a difficult space for theatre.
Have you got any plans to improve it?
We make changes in that if we're doing a new play and it's quite intimate and you want that feeling of intimacy, we will actually perform it in the middle of the floor. Okay. And we might do it in the round. We'll reset the chairs and use it. So we have done some really interesting pieces of drama where the audience have literally been sitting just behind or just in front of the actors. And audiences in Great Yarmouth have loved that because they're not used to that. And it's made the theatre really special, intimate and immediate for them. So I'm quite into that. So it doesn't, I'd rather try and work around it in that way if we can, because I think it's a positive move as well.
What's the volume of the theatre? Do you know the volume, the total volume? Because it's really high ceiling.
No, I haven't a clue. You're the clever one. You'll know about that. I don't know.
I should have brought a laser to measure the height, but it's probably 10 meters high?
I would think so.
12?
Yes. It's very high.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact specifications. I think we've got the theatre specs on our website, but I don't think it talks about how high it is. We will do for the staging.
Yes.
We'll talk about the height for the stage for flats and things, but I don't think I know at all, or that it's written down anywhere how high it is. It just seems vast to me, absolutely vast.
Yeah.
It's and you can imagine, when I first got here, none of the lights were working on the big beams because nobody knew how to get up there, how to do it or whatever. And it just so happened that I have a friend who is an electrician but also a keen mountaineer. And he teaches Duke of Edinburgh Award, so he has all his qualifications. So he set himself up as if he was climbing a mountain with all his harnesses and things. But because he was an electrician, he mended all the lights for us.
Right.
And it was incredible. And he keeps saying to me, "You're going to want me back soon." And I say, "Yes, as the bulbs go, we need him back to do it." So yes, it's very specialist, but it seems incredibly high, scarily high.
Yeah, it's very high. But yeah. Have we gone round everything? Because there's loads of questions to ask Darren. Anything you'd like to mention?
Absolutely. No, I think I'd like to, if I could just do 2 little anecdotes that might just help bring the theatre to life. Is that okay? So one is, I would like to tell you about the first youth production that we did.
Yes.
Is because of the building, we did Jesus Christ Superstar. So it meant they could have microphones, they were singing, but it also meant we could use the balconies. So for the Pharisee, when they have that big scene and they're all looking down on Jesus, they were in the balcony. We used the balcony. We used the back wall, which is where Paul talked about how the window's been blocked in. That had a perfect arch, so we made that where the cross was for Jesus at the end. And it really brought the theatre to life. So we really used the whole theatre. And the young people loved doing it because they felt so immersed in what was happening. And it really gave them ownership of the whole building rather than, you're allowed just to be on the stage. They were allowed access everywhere. And it really got us off on a strong footing, I think. And some of those young people were 8 when we did that now. And now they're, 15, 16. And they're really now confident, do a lot of productions with us. And I really feel that first production was very special because of the building. And it was utilising what's special in the building. And we then carried that on to pantomime. So when we do, a pantomime is really important for us here. A, financially, it's very good. But B, it's often the first time families ever come into a theatre. And if you have a big family and you haven't got much money and you want, your children to come and enjoy panto, at St George's we will make sure that the tickets are accessible and cheap enough to be able to come and enjoy it. So we bring them into panto here and we use the whole building again. So when we did Peter Pan, the building and the balcony was actually Captain Hook's ship. So it was very special again. And the audience were part of that. So when they had to boo Captain Hook, we gave them all soft balls and they threw balls up at Captain Hook on the balcony. But it was just great that it stopped the building being too reverent for them and that they couldn't move in it. It made it like their space and they could do things. So actors and audiences feel ownership of it. And I think it's really important.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much, Debbie. That's fine. Obviously, you're going to follow us with
yes,
Darren.
Yes, absolutely.
But now with Darren, we're going to go through everything to show some interesting features. And he's been involved in since the beginning of the renovation?
For the whole of the renovation. I mean, Darren actually managed to get a lot of the funding in, so without him it wouldn't have happened. But his knowledge of Grade 1 listed buildings is incredible. And what is really lucky for us is that Darren loves Great Yarmouth. He gets Great Yarmouth. He really understands it. And he has been responsible for a lot of the fantastic renovations and keeping those historical buildings going. Without Darren, Great Yarmouth would be a much poorer place. So we're very lucky to have him.
Another amazing sales pitch here. Thank you for selling Darren.
He is lovely.
But thank you for having me here.
No, it's a pleasure. No, it's lovely.
And good luck with everything.
Yes, we need good luck.
And the funding. And hopefully there'll be more and more people interested in coming to
Well, definitely,
St.
this
George.
will really help raise the profile. We did a big conference the other day for the Cultural Board of Suffolk and Norfolk. And we had 140 people in here, sort of leaders in the arts, and they couldn't get over the space. And I thought, this is what we need, because it's suddenly it's put St. George's on the map. So, because it's so beautiful and people have no idea. Yeah, it's special.
So thank you. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us about the history of St. George's Theatre. Can you, first of all, introduce yourself, who you are and what's your involvement in the theatre? And you also wrote a great book, which we can talk about later, but this one is £10 and it's all given. All funds collected are for the theatre, is that correct?
No.
No? Okay, so you can... Fine.
My back pocket.
Your back pocket is okay, it's fine.
It costs too much to print.
Yeah. So, first of all, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Paul Davies. I've been a resident of Yarmouth for over 50 years, retired general practitioner, chair of Great Yarmouth Local History and Archaeological Society for many years, and chairman of various other committees.
And how did you get into the church and writing that book?
Well, I still am actually a member of the Great Yarmouth Preservation Trust, who really got this conversion going. And it took several years, but I was interested in it, and I thought, well, somebody ought to write a book about this. because it's interesting. The church has an interesting history and how you go about actually getting grants and things like that. So that's why I started it. And of course, once I start things, it gets out of control.
Okay.
That's why I publish these things, and vanity publishing, because I don't want somebody to edit it with a big red pen and get rid of all the work that I've done and put into it.
Yeah.
But I do tend to put everything into a book that I've collected, which is probably a fault, but
well, there's quite a lot of interesting pictures and really interesting information about the evolution. So should we start from the beginning? When did the church...
Yes, we have to go back to medieval times, really, when there was a big argument about who appointed the incumbent, the vicar of the parish of Great Yarmouth. Now, the dean and chapter thought they did, and the corporation here, or the council here, thought they did. So at times you had two priests appointed to the parish, one by the dean and chapter of Norwich and one by the council. And sometimes you got both preaching in St Nicholas Church at the same time. This obviously couldn't go on, and I think the corporation decided the answer to this was to build their own church, which they did in 1715, and then have control over who the incumbent was here.
Okay. Seems that there's a lot of independence that was requested or sought in England more than in France. It was so much less independent.
Yes.
For the good and the bad, in a way. Maybe
Well, I think the French are fortunate because the government looks after their buildings.
Yes.
Whereas all we get here at the moment is reduction of VAT on repairs. Yes.
How long did the church operate as a church, and how was it going?
It went on for about 200 years. Even though we had two priests, one appointed for St Nicholas Church in town, one for this, there were still arguments going on. And in fact, the vicar of St Nicholas resigned in the 1880s because of spat with the incumbent here. But it lasted for about 200 years as an independent church. Some people think this is a chapel of ease for St Nicholas. Although St Nicholas allegedly held 5,000 people, there weren't enough churches. And if we go into the Victorian times, a lot of daughter churches were built in the town, like St John's, St James, St Peter's, St Luke's, and so on. But I think this was a bit of spite. Okay, we're going to build our own church and have control over it. And it was built quite lavishly. If you look at the columns behind me, it's got gold paint and lapis-lazuli on the pillars. And there was a fine east window here as well. But that all came to an end because Yarmouth has always had a Puritan streak to it. It supported Cromwell during the Civil War. And they decided that too much decoration in the church detracted from the pulpit, where the word of God was preached. So they bricked in the east window and concentrated on the big pulpit, which is no longer here. But that was the reason. And of course, the painting, the lapis-lazuli and the gold was painted over with brown paint. So it's a simple preaching box, as Puritans like, rather than a church adorned with angels and other bits of frippery, as they would say.
And when did the church started? Who thought about converting it into a theatre, and why did this get converted?
Well, the church shut in 1959.
Okay.
And interestingly, it required an Act of Parliament. And the Act of Parliament said if it ceased to be an arts theatre, it would go back to the Church of England, which, poor St Nicholas fills us with horror, really, because there are 2 buildings to maintain. St Nicholas is bad enough. But it was shut in 1959. The congregation weren't happy, as congregations are when churches are shut, and they moved across the road to the church ruins, where they worshipped for another 2 years before they finally ceased.
Sorry, what was the church closed in 1959? What was the reason why it shut?
Well, it wasn't needed, you see. Church going in England has really bottomed out. There are a lot of churches in rural Norfolk, for example, that have 2, 3, 4 people attending, and they are then expected to maintain it with their income and their giving and their offerings. And it wasn't tenable, and it wasn't really needed.
Okay.
And at that time, of course, St Nicholas had been bombed and gutted, and in 1959 it was partially complete and was reopened in 1961, so the need for a secondary church wasn't necessary, although the daughter churches in Victorian times carried on for several years after that.
How was the church before? Obviously, there's always that nice oak furniture and refurbishment. How was it like? Obviously, we can see some pictures on the book.
Yes, well, it was just an ordinary church with a font. It had a tremendous organ at the West End, put in the 18th century by a very famous organ company called Jordan. Mm-hmm. And of course, when it was closed, what do we do with it? And the answer was, well, we don't know. The Isle of Man Cathedral was interested, but they opted out. St John Smith Square was very interested in it, but when it turned out all they were interested in is the case. And if you go to St John Smith Square in London, you will find that the top part of the case is St George's Church case from here. But what happened to it, I rather fancy that it just went into a skip. But it's a pity. Fantastic organ, if only we had it now. But these organs are expensive. For example, the organ at St Nicholas Church is desperate need of restoration at the cost of £800,000.
800.
So it's not a cheap option, but I rather fancy it just disappeared.
Yeah, so in 1959, they shut the church and they started to convert it into a theatre, an art centre.
Yes, to be used by amateurs like the Great Yarmouth Amateur Dramatics Maskers and that sort of thing, used for exhibitions and so forth. But then it became dangerous, and the ceiling was probably going to collapse. That's why you have this open ceiling now. It was removed.
It was removed at the time, no?
Yes. And after that, it became disused and a bit derelict, and there were various sort of options that the council considered. One was a maritime museum, another was a teaching hub for the hospital, which used to be across the road here, a conference centre and things like that. And, horrifically, it was thought perhaps we demolish it and put a roundabout in its place to ease traffic congestion in Yarmouth, which fortunately didn't happen.
Great, yeah.
And then there was some minor restoration done and they made it safe. Then the amateur dramatics came back in again, and then finally it was really too bad, really, unsafe. And it was shut until the council asked the Great Yarmouth Renovation Trust to try and restore it.
So when did they start the restoration?
Oh, it must be about 15 years ago now.
Okay.
And Hopkins, the architect, did it, and they built the pavilion next door. But people who come here say, if we want a cup of tea or anything, or go to the bar in the interval, we have to go outside and get wet. But the thing is, English Heritage said you must not put the pavilion, must not connect it to the church. So that's why it's a separate building. And there were problems with the roof as well, because when they put the roof on it, the wall collapsed, so the whole thing had to be structurally...
There wasn't any structural engineers at the time.
Engineers.
Talking about the roof, you mentioned something interesting. What's the name of that type of roof? It looks like a hole.
Well, the centre aisle in the church is called the nave because the roof looks like an upturned boat.
Yeah. And
nave is Latin for ship. So that's why it's called the nave, because most church roofs are barrel shape, I suppose.
So they put this roof as part of the renovation.
Yes, they looked at it and thought it was so beautiful and so interesting that people could actually see how a roof is constructed to leave it rather than putting a false ceiling underneath it. Yes.
So obviously it was already built. But
yes.
Okay, and so when obviously we're getting more into the time everybody thought about renovating it into what it is at the moment. What happened between the time it was a theatre after 1959 and then like 2012?
Well, as I say, it was used by various amateur dramatic societies, and then it was shut down because it was unsafe.
Okay.
So it was shut down for several years. Certain people like Mrs. Valerie Howkins was very keen on the building, who had a jewellery shop down King Street, and she sort of led the forefront to get something done about it. And she lived long enough to see it, actually, which was fortunate.
You mentioned about the walls collapsing. How much of the walls collapsed? Is there any pictures?
I was talking about the pavilion. The council decided they were rather like a wren church, so they offered the job to a man called Price of Richmond, who'd built churches, and it was meant to be modelled on St Clement Danes Church in the Strand in London, but I don't think it is really.
Yeah.
And it was funded by a tax on coals and cinders coming into the port of Great Yarmouth. So, after the Great Fire of London, the way to actually rebuild what was lost, like guild halls, town halls, churches and so forth, the money was got from a tax on imported coal, not necessarily imported from abroad, because most of the coal for Yarmouth came from North Shields and just down the North Sea. But there was a tax on that. So they taxed it, and then they found they hadn't got enough money to build the church, so they increased the tax.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Have you got anything else to mention? Anything interesting that we need to know?
I think one of there have been various incumbents here. One of them, a man called Bevin, who was born in Australia.
Yeah.
And when his parents were coming home from Australia, their boat sunk in the Bay of Biscay, and they were drowned, leaving Bevin as an 8-year-old. As an orphan, and he was brought up by his uncle. But he went to Cambridge University and played rugby. Okay. And he was the first captain of the Welsh rugby union team to play England. And they played at Blackheath at the time. And Wales were beaten hollow by England, which is probably something to celebrate, but perhaps not. With a name like Davies, I shouldn't say that. But the reason for that is the changing rooms were in a pub.
Okay.
So by the time they got changed and downed a few pints, their playing ability was a bit reduced. But there is still a plate called the Bevan Plate, which is played every year between Australia and England in rugby union. So his name lives on. But he was terribly low church. He didn't like anything. He wouldn't have anything on the altar. No flowers, no cross, no candles, nothing. And he was evangelical, and there were very big sort of mission meetings here. There was a big revival in 1921 when all the fishermen turned to God, and they all wept in the aisles and crawled up to the altar to be blessed, and that sort of evangelical movement.
When was that? Do you know why what started
well,
this?
I don't know. It's probably I can't say mass hysteria, but you know how these things escalate. How girls start screaming at Oasis and so forth, and everybody else screams. I don't know. But it was a very big movement, and perhaps it was post-World War I. You don't know, do you?
Yeah.
But Bevan was here, and his manse, where he lived, was in Alexandra Road at that time, where the Park Surgery bought later in the 1950s. But he was an interesting man, and the rest, a chap called Reverend Humphrey had a very good art collection that some of the pieces are now in international museums, so there was some quality. A vicar came here and was offered the post, and when he got home he wrote a letter. He said, when I found out what the stipend was, the salary was, I decided that God wasn't calling me to Yarmouth after all. So there are amusing stories like that in its history. Great,
very interesting. Well, unless you have anything else to add?
Well, there was a very big men's service here, probably 400-500 men, which was created in the 1880s. And they did all sorts of things. They had several football teams, for example. They met at St George's Hall across the way there. They had games and they had services, and as they played football and other things. And a lot of them went to the First World War, and a lot of them were killed, of course.
Yeah.
But St George's wrote them all letters, on a monthly basis to those serving abroad. And the ladies weren't forgotten. They were given sewing lessons.
Great. I don't know how
so
we
much
would
for emancipation.
Yeah, I don't know how we would take this now.
But then, of course, we know that church-going has gone really down to the bottom. And,
yes, yeah.
All these things have disappeared, although they were of good social use at the time, because, Yarmouths are not a rich people, and all these people were living in the rows around here in some degree of poverty.
Yeah, well, I was going to, maybe you're the person to ask the question. Great Yarmouth, I was expecting it to be a bit more dynamic as a city, if it's not... if I can say this. But yeah, there seems to be... I was talking to Ben, one of the volunteers, yesterday, who said that the heydays of Great Yarmouth was more in the 50s and 60s.
Well, that's right. The heydays of Yarmouth start when we started having paid bank holidays, back in the...
Yeah, true.
When the end of the 19th century, I don't know, I can't remember the date now. And then the railways, of course, the railway came here in the 1840s.
Okay.
Bass Brewery, for example, had several trains they hired, 14, 15, to bring their workers over here for a day at the seaside. Free of charge. And then the 50s and 60s post-war, yes, it was. And then, of course, we had cheap air travel.
Yes.
And then people went to Benidorm instead. But I think it's on the up, really. A lot of grant money's been put into the town, and various things, like Palmer's, the marketplace, various other buildings are being rejuvenated. The thing about Yarmouth as a seaside town is its plus point is it's got a lot of heritage.
Yes.
The largest parish church in England, the longest medieval town wall in the country, and so on and so on and so on. Whereas other seaside towns like Southend, Clacton, Blackpool haven't got that. So I think if Yarmouth can concentrate more on its heritage rather than its buckets and spades, it will do well. Yes, it will survive, but it's a good town. It's a nice town.
We came not very far from here on holiday with the family. So and then we could see a lot. It was bustling with people.
Yeah.
The beaches were full. Obviously, it was during probably the hottest week and the nicest week of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure it would probably not find the same heydays again as the 50s
No,
and
I
60s.
don't think they come back. I think they're probably going to attract people who are more interested in history and heritage. And the other difficulty is, going back a generation, the kids at schools were taught about the history of Yarmouth. And of course, all that disappeared with the national curriculum.
Yes.
But it's slowly coming back that teachers are now teaching about the history of Yarmouth. We shall see.
Yeah, well, let's hope so.
Unless it's swallowed by the North Sea.
Well, thank you very much, Paul.
Okay, Mark,
it was very kind
right.
for coming and to make. And yeah, I'll recall his lovely book, which is on sale.
It's on sale in the theatre for £10.
Okay.
And there are not many left.
Yeah, St George's, Great Yarmouth, Chapel Church, Art Centre, Paul Davies. Is it on Amazon online?
No.
Sold online?
It's just here.
You have to come to Great Yarmouth. Even better reason to visit the theatre.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Paul.
Okay, Mark.